So next we have a presentation from the Lake County Stormwater, Nick Agnes? Agins, I'm sorry, and Steve Hauser. Thank you so much for joining us. I know a lot of residents have asked a lot of questions and are looking forward to what you have to say to us today. So if you want to please come and...
Thanks everybody for inviting us. My name is Nick Agins. This is Steve Hauser. We are with the Lake County Stormwater Management Department. We're here today to talk about stormwater basins in our community. Okay, ready? Here's the first slide. Again, my name is Nick Agins, stormwater technician. Steve Hauser's our stormwater engineer. We're going to go ahead and get started. So to kind of get a full understanding and picture of how the stormwater department came to be, I figured we'd start with the history of water quality briefly in the United States. In 1975, Congress passed the Clean Water Act. That was really the first environmental regulation that decided to look at point source pollution for water quality in our nation's rivers and lakes. You can see it's emphasized there by that picture on the right. That's been the poster child for Clean Water Act. That's the 1969 fire in Coyote River. That's really what helped spurn the Clean Water Act. Fast forward to 1990, and phase one of the Clean Water Act brought forward the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System and MS4 permit. Those abbreviations are defined down at the bottom footnote. Basically, that was to cover medium and large communities, large cities, under those permit guidelines and compliance standards to try to reduce that elimination or eliminate that pollution. In 1999, phase two of the Clean Water Act came about, and that focused on urbanization, basically anything that wasn't a large MS4. Large schools, communities like Lake County, and in fact 20 of the 23 communities in Lake County were required to gain compliance from this phase 2 MS4 Clean Water Act amendment. 17 of those communities are in Lake County Stormwater Management Program, so they are co-permittees with the stormwater department's compliance on the commissioner's permit, and we help service their compliance needs from that phase 2. History of stormwater departments started in March 2003. This was in direct response to the small MS4 phase 2. And I know I'm throwing a lot of acronyms at everybody. It's the government, we like acronyms. And just refer to the footnotes down at the bottom. They are defined. I don't want to spend too much time going through it. It's a lot. But basically, this was a mandate from the OEPA/EPA to gain compliance for the MS4 permit. Lake County Commissioners has this permit. We really work towards compliance with that. We formed as a regional sewer district, essentially, under ORC 6117 and their subchapters. It's under the Sanitation Engineers Authority. That's really what gives us authority, gave the commissioners authority to lay that out as a department. And in 2008, Stormwater Department's rules and regulations went into effect. So what does Lake County Stormwater Management do? Essentially, we are a regulatory agency in charge of the county's MS4 permit compliance program. You see listed below are 6 MCMs, and that stands for minimum control measures. Basically, these are milestones that you should be hitting during any MS4 compliance program. We are involved in at least 5 out of the 6 directly, and our program also affords the opportunity to assist our member communities, those 17 member communities, to perform regional stormwater improvement projects, as well as maintaining compliance under the small MS4. Today we're going to be focusing on MCM5, the post-construction stormwater management and development. Before we do that, I want to go through some terms that we're going to be discussing to bring everybody up to speed. 2 terms that are commonly used interchangeably are detention and retention. They both do the same thing, they just do them in different ways. They both hold back water for a certain amount of time. Detention, if you remember in school, if you got in trouble and you got sent to after-school detention, you were not there forever. You were there temporarily.
Thank God.
So detention is a temporary pool of water. Those practices, stormwater practices that are dry detention, are dry basins. This is a traditional stormwater detention where there is no permanent pool of water. It provides no water quality treatment, so it's those depressions in the landscape where you think there should be water and there currently isn't, unless it is just rain. Dry extended detention is the same as a dry basin. No permanent pool of water, but this one does provide water quality treatment through a slow release of a volume of water over time, typically 24 to 48 hours. Conversely, retention uses a permanent pool of water, and we'll see a couple of examples of this as we go forward. A wet basin is a practice that is a wet retention basin. It is the same as a dry basin, but it holds a permanent pool of water. It also does not provide water quality treatment. A wet extended retention basin is the same as a wet basin, where it has a permanent pool of water, but this one provides water quality treatment through a slow release over time. Another term we will be talking about is an easement, and in terms of post-construction management, we're talking about an area of land that's been legally described and dedicated to an entity, either public or private, in order to provide access responsibilities or maintenance. Easements can be found on a map when we're talking about post-construction practices, or a plat. A plat is a legal description. In this case, our examples will be a residential subdivision. You can find these plats on the county auditor's website. Basically, it goes through and describes black and white where the boundaries of a subdivision are, common lands, center lines of roads, things like that. And a water quality orifice is a small low flow orifice in the outlet structure that passes the first flush of stormwater into a basin. These things can range anywhere from 3/4 of an inch, sometimes smaller, up into 2 inches, sometimes a little bit bigger, depending on the design of the subdivision. And that is what kind of determines those wet and dry extended detention and retention basins, because that is what provides that low flow over time. Here's two examples in Concord Township of what we're talking about. On the left is a dry extended detention basin, and you can kind of see that thin ribbon of water within that yellow outline area. That's the low flow channel of a dry extended detention basin. The blue arrow shows the flow through that pond. You can see there's no permanent pool of water. The wet extended retention basin, this is actually where Tri-Point is. I don't know what UH calls it now, if it's still Tri-Point, but if you're driving down Girdle, that's the pond out front. I think it has a fountain. And that holds a permanent pool of water, but that also is a water quality treatment pond. So you can see the differences right there between detention and retention. Steve's now going to talk about this example of an outlet structure we typically see in residential subdivisions that provides water quality treatment, and that's the dry extended detention. Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. So you guys have probably seen in subdivisions or on ponds those big concrete looking structures and wondering, hey, how does water get in there? How does it leave the site? So basically that concrete structure, those are a catch basin or an outlet structure. And those typically have holes or designed windows, things like that, that allows water in to the outlet pipe at a controlled rate. So before a subdivision or a commercial building gets built, they'll usually look at how the site originally drains, and they'll be able to come up with some numbers and ways to quantify how quickly the water leaves. So then when the site gets developed, they'll basically design stormwater ponds to help mimic and replicate those flows, but with post-development. So the holes on there, on the diagram on the left, the bottom one is actually the water quality orifice. That's the water quality orifice that Nick was talking about. So subdivisions, commercial developments, those are required to treat a certain volume of water quality per the OEPA. And that is basically to treat the new impervious area that was installed and all the sediment pollutants, anything like that that comes now into the pond. So the next orifice up, typically that's the detention orifice. Sometimes they'll actually perform in tandem, but those regulate the discharge of the water from the site. So those are designed by an engineer and modeled, to basically help keep those flows, slow down those new flows, those increased flows from post-development, so they don't flood downstream neighbors or properties. So, and then usually at the rim, there's usually a grate. Sometimes you can pull those off, but high flow events, water will actually crest into there as well. So now we're gonna Nick mentioned plats. We're gonna kind of take a look at plat and how, you know, we reference these on a day-to-day basis when we get called from, you know, from residents, things like that. So this is a typical title page on a plat. Example, Nature Preserve South. You'll see there's blue that's highlighted on the left, and then a little bit of yellow highlighted on the right. We'll kind of touch base a little bit more on that, but the plat basically goes through legal descriptions of certain areas that dedicate easements or areas to a specific party, and those highlight responsibilities. So this is usually like a page 2. This actually shows like the layout of subdivision. But on the left, you can kind of see there's some blue that has been outlined and then also some yellow. So the blue is actually a drainage easement to Concord Township, and that's actually over a storm sewer pipe that takes water from the roadway, and then it goes into that stormwater basin. It's actually the dry pond that Nick used in a previous example, and I'll show it to you on the next slide. But that kind of gives an idea that there's an easement that actually goes over that pipe to protect it, and also gives the township the right to you know, repair it if there's any issues with it in the future, so roadway doesn't flood or water can continue to drain. Same way with the low flow profile, or the low flow drainage easement. The yellow is actually over the entire basin, and that's like a local service drainage easement that's typically deeded to a HOA or a party to manage the overall basin. So here's a little bit more close up. The yellow really highlights the local service drainage easement, and the blue goes over the drainage easement to township. And on the right, it's not perfectly overlaid with what's out there, but we try to kind of drop in the GIS aerial over the pond so you can kind of get a reference on what the easement encompasses. So here's kind of close-up language on what was on the title page. Basically, the top goes over how the basin is dedicated to a party and gives certain responsibilities on maintaining the pond. It could be to dredge and excavate, basically re-swale, maintain vegetation, things like that. The blue one, the easement to Concord Township, that goes over similar language, talks about repairing and maintaining storm sewer pipe, any appurtenances that would affect the performance of that pipe and allowing it to function as best as it can. So Nick also brought up, where can you find plats? Anybody can log on to Lake County's GIS site, basically type in the address of interest. You can click on the parcel and you'll have a pop-up window right there, and you'll be able to select the plat option, and it'll actually pop up the title page, and there'll be some options on the top left-hand corner on that page for people to select and go to. So with that, I'll give it back to Nick for inspection.
Okay, so when we get drainage complaints or we do routine inspections, the first thing we'll usually do is go to the plat and see where the basin is on the landscape and how it fits into any easements that may be recorded for that subdivision. If this is part of a routine inspection for compliance of the MS4 permit, that MCM number 5, we'll do a formal standardized fillable inspection sheet. This is an example of it here. This is based off of OEPA inspection guidelines. This is something we created using the typical inspection criteria for these stormwater basins. Each one is tailored to the type of practice we're looking at. And once this is completed, we'll be looking for things like if the water quality orifice is installed, if emergency spillway is in, if everything is functioning, appurtenances are as they should be. Any deficiencies get noted, and if there aren't any, either way, they get sent to the entity that is responsible for maintaining that basin. In the example that we just showed, that would go to the adjoining homeowners and also Concord Township, because they are a party with a drainage easement in that basin. The frequency of inspections for these, I know that's a topic that we get asked quite a bit. It's actually not spelled out in the permit so much, but we take those recommendations from EPA. I think their recommendations are once per permit term. We typically inspect them more frequently than that. This is an inspection. These types of inspections we perform for our member communities to try to keep everybody moving towards the compliance. We like to work with, not against, HOAs, the townships and municipalities that may own these easements and be required to maintain them. We try to play the middleman kind of between the OEPA and those private entities. We're all trying to work towards a common goal of water quality. That's our last slide. If anybody has any questions, again, my name is Nick Agins. This is Steve Hauser. Our main phone line is there. Our main email is there, and we welcome anybody to reach out with any questions they have regarding this or anything else that we might have talked about. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And,
So I do have a quick question. So if residents are having some drainage issues, basically the first step is to call your office where you would look at the plat, do an investigation, and then sort of see again where the issue lies.
If it's within a subdivision, yeah, going the route of the plat is the first thing we look at. If it's an outlot or some sort of other drainage facility, you can call us, you can call the township. The township's gonna call us, and we're all gonna work together on it and make a site visit. It's a case-by-case thing.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you because we do have a lot of residents that have issues, and I know they call your department, and you guys are extremely helpful, and you do look for ways to make the situation the best possible, with the best possible solution. So thank you very much, and thank you very much for the information.
You're
Any
welcome.
questions?
And likewise, it's a pleasure working with Tim and Andy, Tim Brown. Tim's picked up on the learning curve quite quickly when it comes to the stormwater stuff, and he's a great ally to have out there as a direct contact to the residents.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks. I've already been on site a couple times with Nick and Steve.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
We all have. It's fun.
you guys have helped out
Yeah.
a lot. I mean, we've got some residents that are happy about how things worked out based on their advice, and we're able to get it. Unfortunately, can't always help everybody, but the information's good regardless. And sometimes it's landowners' situation. But your department's been incredibly helpful. I enjoy working with you guys, and you're great.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you.